It's the first of its kind in the city of Pasadena. Find out what city leaders are doing to combat the homeless crisis and the shortage of affordable housing. That and more in this episode of Arroyo Now. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Arroyo Now. I'm your host, LaTonya Norton, and today we have a fantastic show. Thank you for joining us. With us today, we have three guests. We have Christian Hart, who is with Community Builders Group. We also have Jim Osterling with Bridge Advisors, and we have Bill Huang representing the City of Pasadena. He is the housing director. And today's show revolves around affordable housing. We all know there's an affordable housing crisis in the nation, but specifically in the City of Pasadena, what's being done to combat this crisis? Our three guests will tell us about an exciting, first of its kind community development in the City of Pasadena. First of all, I would like to welcome our guests, and please tell us a little bit about yourselves. First of all, Bill, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for elevating the issue of affordable housing. It is really the issue of our day. So I am the director of the City of Pasadena's Housing Department. We provide funding for some of the affordable housing development. We also enforce a ordinance here called the Inclusionary Ordinance that requires market rate developers to set aside some of their units as affordable housing. We also address homelessness.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Jim?
LaTonya, thank you to you and Pasadena Media for sponsoring this show. And I'm a one-trick pony. I've been a real estate developer and real estate finance for my entire career, about 44 years. And during that time, I started out working for large corporate real estate firms, but the second half of my career has been as the founder of Bridge Advisors, and actually did my first affordable housing project way back in 1987. It was 437 units, and we financed that one with tax-exempt bonds.
That is impressive, Jim. Thank you so much for being here. Christian.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Christian Hart, and I'm a co-founder of the Community Builders Group. Our company has been developing affordable housing since 1999, and we have developed affordable units throughout California, Arizona, and Hawaii. This project is particularly near and dear to our hearts because it's literally 5 minutes from our headquarters, and we have really been blown away by the immense reception from the community, as well as the government here. The City of Pasadena has done a fabulous job in helping us to move this project forward. So it's a very unique time, as Bill and Jim alluded to, and helping with affordable housing is our mission statement.
Thank you so much for that. And once again, this episode revolves around affordable housing, specifically a new community in the City of Pasadena. And that development is called Pasadena Studios. It is an affordable micro unit development. And Jim, I know you're going to give us a tour of this facility, this community. But before we get into that, tell us what makes Pasadena Studios so special.
Pasadena Studios is special in many respects. Number one, you already mentioned, it's a micro unit development. Each unit is a small studio apartment. And what we did is, recognizing that the units are small, we really loaded up the building with amenities to make it a very livable community. And it's also very affordable. And Christian and Bill will talk about that later on in the interview, about the specifics about how that's affordable and what levels of income and rent levels are eligible to live in Pasadena Studios.
Absolutely. And when you say micro unit, Pasadena has never had an affordable housing community like this one. What brought this about? How did we get here?
Well, LaTonya, at a groundbreaking back in December, I said this was an overnight success that was 6 years in the making. We spent a lot of time hunting for the right location here in Pasadena. We wanted to be transit oriented. We wanted to be near the job centers, near Old Pasadena. And we had to find the right property and the right zoning. And we stumbled a few times before we finally got to this location at 280 North Oakland Avenue. And then actually, once we got started on the development, the city has been a wonderful partner in terms of helping to streamline the timing, the development of Pasadena studios.
And one of the things that I found so interesting in doing my research on this property is the fact that this property was developed at no cost to taxpayers. Is that correct? How did that happen?
We used no loans and subsidies from the city. Christian will talk more specifically about the financing that we did employ, and we're really proud of the fact that it didn't require any loans and subsidies from the city because, for example, at the same time that we've been developing Pasadena studios, down the street, the Salvation Army has been developing a 59-unit similar micro unit development, and theirs is for homeless and formerly homeless people, and it's providing permanent supportive housing and wraparound services, which is very, very important. And they needed a lot more loans and subsidies from the city, so we're glad that we didn't have to utilize any of those, freeing up those resources to be used for the homeless type developments, such as the Salvation Army is doing.
Christian, what would you add to that?
I think when we first started the project, we were looking at the missing middle, about 80% of area median income. And that's a very difficult housing group to satisfy because typically conventional development focuses on high end and trying to maximize profitability, understandably so in this marketplace. But there aren't tax credits or tax exempt bonds as a subsidy that you can facilitate that type of development for at 80% of area median income. When Jim and Community Builders Group started to collaborate on this, we started to look at the low income housing mechanism. And that exists since 1988, primarily with 9% tax credits and 4% tax exempt bonds. And that's the structure that we ended up doing. And it actually houses a far greater spectrum of affordability. And we can get into that later on, but that's where the nuance is. And it's really understanding how to utilize these resources at the federal level and bring them to the local level.
And when you say missing middle, that's that phrase, is that what you're talking about when we hear working poor?
Precisely.
One paycheck away from being on the street?
To some degree, it's actually a little bit higher in wage structure, and you might have additional family members. And that mechanism is what's missing in the marketplace, both from a public subsidy perspective, as well as the private marketplace, where you can mix and match some of those elements. But historically speaking, you're really looking at tax credits as the fundamental basis in which to develop affordable housing. And that really leaves out those folks who are making more income, but have additional family members to care for, and they're not able to really qualify in the tax credit world. And they're not making enough to actually pay the going rate on a conventional deal that would typically be far more expensive for them. So that's that missing element that I was referencing.
Absolutely. And we've all heard the stories. A lot of people are homeless, but they still work every day. They have to.
Yes, you are 100% correct. And that's where we, as a society, if we start to look at how we entitle property, how the city approaches that level of public housing, it's really critical to the pathway. And then being able to acquire land from an affordable perspective for development. If you utilize the entitlement and you have committed developers who are willing to go down that road for the affordable mechanism, then you can start to really increase supply in the long term. We really need a collective, collaborative policy between the public sector as well as the development community.
Absolutely. It takes everyone working together, a holistic approach. Bill, when we talk about the City of Pasadena, this project, at no cost to taxpayers, we know that this has been a project years in the making, and we would be remiss if we did not mention the late Councilman John Kennedy, who was instrumental in making this come to fruition.
That's correct, right. The late John Kennedy was a strong supporter of this project. He was very interested in this concept of micro units. And this project is trailblazing. This is going to be the first micro unit project that has been developed in many years, and because it is all affordable at various levels, some at low income and some at very low income and some at extremely low income. This is a very important affordable housing resource that is getting built. These units are all going to be affordable in perpetuity, and that's really what is crucial, because the problem that folks have, the reason why we have an affordable housing crisis, is because housing costs, rents have increased much faster than people's incomes. And this has been going on for many, many years. And so every year, more of a household's budget has to go towards housing costs. At some point, it becomes extremely tenuous. And even we're seeing folks fall out of homelessness, or who cannot fall into homelessness because they can't afford a rent. They may be working, they may have Social Security, they may have other income, regular income sources, but it's not enough because the housing costs keep going up. So a project like this restricts the rent increases to the rate of increase of incomes. And so the market might be going up 10%, 15% in some hot years, but these rents are going to be tied to income. So if the incomes go up a few percent, these will also track the incomes, and you won't have this problem of every year I have to spend more of my household budget towards housing costs. So this is a very important project, and something that the late Councilmember John Kennedy was a strong proponent of.
Absolutely. Well, I
Tanya,
can't wait.
could I add a few words about Councilmember John Kennedy, if I may?
Please.
John was a personal friend and an inspiration to me. This project happens to be located in Council District 3, his former council district, and he was very supportive and influential from the outset. And I can't thank him enough for the support he gave the project. He had a goal, 1,000 units in 1,000 days. And we're glad to be a small part of that with our 180 units. And I wonder if Bill could also report on how we're doing on achieving John's goal.
Well, we are, I would say we have exceeded his goal. We currently today, including this project, have about 565 units of affordable housing under construction right now. And 2 years ago, we participated in the purchase of 1,000 units of existing luxury apartment buildings that have been converted to moderate and low income units. And so we've exceeded the 1,000 units, but we really appreciate his push. And the challenge for us is to keep the pipeline full of new affordable housing projects. And the city is working diligently, looking at some of its city-owned properties to designate them for affordable housing, and even purchasing new properties for use as affordable housing.
Wow, that's impressive. So he's up there looking down, smiling, because that goal has been achieved. That's what you're telling us, right?
Correct.
Awesome. I cannot wait to take a look inside these units. Jim, I think you're going to take us on a tour. Let's go.
If we're ready, we can do a virtual tour, and I'll try to narrate. It's a very short tour, so I'm going to have to talk fast.
Okay.
Okay, this is the front of the building. This is at 280 North Oakland. And one thing that you should note is every single one of these units has a private balcony. We're now walking into the front door, and the front lobby area has seating areas with large screen TV, conversation areas, and is a generous community space for our residents as well as for their guests. Now we're going to walk back into the elevator bay. We're going to go up to the elevator, and we're going to get out on the second floor. And as we walk down the hallway, you're going to see on your left a very generous laundry facility. And straight ahead, we have the fitness center. And then we're going to scan over, and that's a laundry center. And above each of those is more common area seating areas. We're now going to walk into a typical unit. These are micro units. They're very efficient and small in design. And we're going to walk out into the private balcony, all of which have awesome views in all directions. You're now up on the rooftop deck, which is very exciting. This area has barbecues, sinks, outstanding views of the San Gabriel Mountains. You can see the sun setting there. And if you were to look the other direction, you have wonderful city lights views. And we're coming right back around to the front of Pasadena Studios. So that was a very quick tour. Now, the good news is in about mid to late July, you'll get to see the real tour because construction is almost completed. We'll be finished in mid to late July, and then we can do live tours of the building.
That is amazing. I love that. And the amenities, I love that it seems like, you, the developers, you all thought of everything.
Well, we had a great architectural team. We had a great partner in Community Builders Group. It takes a village or a city to make a project like this. I know that's a cliche, but it's really true in this case. And our design team in particular came up with the execution of the private balconies. We recognize that these units are small; they're micro units. So we wanted to make the overall development, the overall community, a very livable place for our residents.
And obviously, with a micro unit, this isn't suitable for families, if you will. But who's eligible, or who's the perfect person to live at Pasadena Studios?
I'm going to have Christian address that.
That's a great question. This is a single resident unit. So by regulatory agreement with the City of Pasadena, only one person can occupy the unit. Now, the perfect demographic is somebody who is coming back from school and is earning somewhere between $30,000 to $45,000, and they would like to rent in the urban core of Pasadena and have access to the Gold Line, have access to all of the amenities of the parks and recreational aspects that Pasadena offers, as well as the job market. And so when we look at that, we're getting a tremendous influx of younger people who cannot afford to live in a conventional unit, but can afford to live in an SRO, the single resident occupancy unit that we're building. In conjunction with that, we're looking at a lot of seniors, folks who have had a life-changing event and are perhaps alone now and would like to live in a very locationally beneficial area for them to gain access to the freeway or to the Gold Line and be able to live within those parameters that I mentioned before for the location. This is very unique in terms of that barbell. So you have both the young and a senior population, and then you have folks in the middle. And so we're seeing a tremendous interest in the project, primarily because of its location. And I want to build on, that was the vision of Councilman Kennedy in terms of locating an affordable housing project in an area where you could maximize the transportation corridor. We are in between two Gold Line locations, two Gold Line platforms, both on Holly Street as well as on Lake Avenue, both within walking distance. And so there was a purpose to this. And I think, again, it goes back to the collaboration between what the city wanted to see built eventually with these micro units, SRO units, and then in conjunction with that, with Councilman Kennedy's vision to actually put affordability close to the city corridor and maximize opportunities for people. Jim and I and the rest of our development team really took that lead, and we were able to execute on the building itself.
And if I might add to Christian's comments about being located near public transportation and particularly near the Gold Line stations, there's a phenomenon that has been happening throughout the country, which is where there is a desire to build high density housing near these transit stops, which are big public investments. So the public will build new light rail stations or a subway station, and then the desire is to support the transit by building high density housing. Well, and so the local agencies typically they will upzone the land around the transit stops. But when you upzone land, you greatly increase the value, which means that developers typically come in, they have to pay top dollar for this land. It's very expensive. And then you build the housing, and to make it work, you have to build housing where you get very high rents, which means you're really designing the housing towards a high-end, higher income demographic. And unfortunately, folks at higher income tend not to use the public transportation.
Sure.
So there's a sort of unintended consequence. It's that, we want to do a lot of housing, but it's maybe not the best kind of housing to support the public transportation. The real home run, the real sweet spot you want to get is to build affordable housing, high density affordable housing in the transit oriented districts where the users have a much higher propensity to utilize public transportation. So it supports the public transportation and it provides the affordable housing. This is really the sweet spot. And that's one of the things that's very exciting about this project.
I want to go back to what you mentioned about high density in just a moment, but first going back to who's eligible to live here, because I know a lot of people will see this and they'll reevaluate their current situation and they'll wonder, should I apply? Do I qualify? What about couples? Maybe they are on fixed incomes. What about Section 8? What about people who were evicted or currently homeless? Do you work with outside organizations to perhaps provide those resources and link people to the facility or to the development?
Those are great questions. So, at the minimal amount at 30% of area median income, you're talking roughly approximately around $12,000. It's basically $11,916. And if you make at 60% of area median income, you're talking about someone at the $52,000 level. So you have a broad range of income. Unfortunately, because this is a single resident only unit, we don't have the permission from the city or from the regulatory aspects to allow couples to live there. So this is for single resident only. And in terms of the unhoused, we are very strong proponents of taking any application that one wants to submit and working with whatever groups. We have reached out to churches, we have reached out to stakeholders in the community to see if they have people in need and maybe they have some form of subsidy. There's Section 8, which we're more than happy to take. That is a welcome demographic. We work with that group in terms of the compliance aspects. And so that's a welcome applicant. In terms of working with folks that are unhoused or working with a third party fiduciary that might be a nonprofit, if you will, more than happy to do that. And so at the end of the day, we do like to hear and interview everyone and try to work within the context of that personal narrative that the applicant brings to the table. And so if we have to, we need to comply with the city aspects, we need to comply with the state requirements from a regulatory perspective, but we are very open to trying to work with people and see if there's an opportunity to satisfy their needs for housing and really go above and beyond. And that's something Jim believes in. That's something I believe in, and the rest of our team. So we're striving mightily to turn over every stone. How can we help house people? That is our goal here. That's our mission statement.
Absolutely. So you have those guidelines, you have the rules you have to comply with, but you also take every case, every situation on a case-by-case basis.
Without a doubt. And we've opened up at 424 Lake Avenue offices in our building where we have our headquarters, and we have designated management teams. It's a third-party management company, Wind Management, that will ultimately manage the property, but they also manage the process from an application perspective. And so they're on site now on the same floor that I am, and I'm seeing how people are being treated and met with, and so we're really trying to enhance this experience. And then we turn those results over to the city so they check our work. And so it's a collaboration again. At every aspect of this development, we have worked collaboratively with the city, the state, and it's been a very meaningful and beneficial process.
Bill, you mentioned high density a couple of minutes ago, and I'm very curious because I know that nationwide, there's been, years ago, there's been several trends when it comes to building affordable housing, that especially high density, that there would be mixed income, that you would have some at market rate, you would have a percentage that's affordable. I'm sure you know about this too. All developers, these are federal guidelines in order to get funding, community block development funding and things of that sort. But with this particular project, 180 units, all affordable housing, what made you take this model in terms of mixed income? And I know the answer. The answer is, hey, this is a housing crisis. Like, we need affordable housing. If you just have a sliver of a small percentage, that really doesn't address the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although this project is 100% affordable, it is affordable at different income levels. Okay. So there are some units for households that make up to 30% of the area median income, some that make up to 50% of the area median income, and some up to 60% of the area median income. So it really, that's a wide range of individuals that this property does serve. So it is affordable, but it's at three different income levels, at least three. Am I right, Christian? I think it's three levels.
That is correct.
Of affordable incomes.
Jim,
LaTonya, if I may, there's another important criteria that we're following, and that is the Pasadena local preference for existing residents and helping the residents that were priced out of Pasadena return. And Bill can elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's very important for the affordable housing that is built here in the city of Pasadena to benefit people here in Pasadena. So it's not exclusively for the people of Pasadena, only for the people of Pasadena, but there is a preference for those who live and work here in Pasadena. And a few years ago, we also created a category where up to 20% of the units would be available for individuals who used to live in Pasadena and got priced out. Sorry, my motion sensor light just went off, but hey, actually, it's a little bit more contrast here. So it's a kind of a return to Pasadena preference. So if they could show that they lived in Pasadena within, I believe it was the last 10 years, that they are up to 20% of the units are given priority for up to 20% of the units. Of course, everybody still has to meet the maximum income levels for the different types of units. So we're very excited, and our experience has been in our other affordable housing developments utilizing the Pasadena preferences. The vast majority of people have ties to Pasadena, either live or work in Pasadena.
Christian, what has been the response
in terms of the project?
In terms of the residents who live in Pasadena?
We have, it's been overwhelming. It's actually been mind-boggling how many applicants we've received, at least in terms of the inquiry, and then how many people are committed to the process, because folks have to comply with bringing in their income and proving out what level of income they fit in. And it's a tall tale sometimes because you have to go through a lot of steps in the process and it's time consuming. But as Jim alluded to, and Bill, with the type of Pasadena preference, with the local San Gabriel Valley housing supply being so low, we are seeing an overwhelming response. So we have hundreds of applicants for the project, and we're methodically going through that process. And I wanted to add, when someone comes in and they have some aspect to their credit history or past eviction, or they've had a difficulty, we really try to understand what that incident consisted of. Was it an isolated incident? And then we can build on that to try to get them over the obstacles that they need to confront in terms of qualifying. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to see folks housed, and if we can house local Pasadena residents, that is our preference. But we're really looking at the totality of the San Gabriel Valley and trying to be a solution here. It's really one of the first types of transactions that you see in terms of a micro unit where you have a single resident only. There are a lot of couples, as you mentioned earlier. There are a lot of families that need housing, but this is a streamlined process, if you will. If you're a single person and you need housing, it's far more effective in terms of the paperwork. So we are seeing an accelerated process in that regard.
And I love that you take each situation on a case-by-case basis, because once you mention credit scores or certain things,
exactly,
some people are saying, I'm out, I don't qualify. But you're saying,
let's have a discussion, because quite often there is a solution, and it might not be easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. But we can try to understand where that particular applicant is coming from, and then fashion, hey, is there some form of subsidy out there? Is there some third party that's willing to take a risk and help subsidize this individual for whatever reason? There are a lot of people who have fallen into an unhoused state or into a situation where they need to qualify for an affordable housing unit, not because they're not a solid human being. It's because they've confronted a situation that was just too much of an obstacle to overcome at that point in time in their lives. But they have a very good track record. They have a job. They're part of our community. So Jim, the rest of our team, we've really focused on trying to unearth other solutions to try to house these folks.
And when you talk about micro units, do you feel this is the way of the future? And will this project open up more doors for projects like this?
That's an interesting question. I just came back from being a delegate with the City of LA to the City of Vienna. And the City of Vienna calls their micro units smart units. And Vienna has one of the most robust affordable housing programs in the world. They call it social housing. And yes, they look at it as the smart housing as a very strong component to their overall housing plan. I think in taking the lessons I learned there and what I can see for our future here in Pasadena and in Southern California in the future, it is a very important aspect. You can look at how these units are constructed, and if we advance technology and utilize some of those advancements in a way to create a model for faster development, quicker response, that's very encouraging. But I don't want to misconstrue micro unit development and say it's going to be the silver bullet to our housing crisis. I think it's an important element to it. And quite frankly, we're looking at doing another 450 units here in Pasadena, where it's part of the solution, but we also recognize that couples need to be housed and families need to be housed. So I think in the future, we'll see some micro units, and then in conjunction with a build out that consists of 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. So we look at the totality of the issue.
And what about pets? I forgot to ask you about that.
Yes, pets are very welcome. We have learned, Jim was talking about balconies. We recognized during COVID, during that crisis, that people needed to go out on their balcony to get some fresh air. In Europe, you are far more restricted to movement than we were in the United States, but balconies are a saving grace. Likewise, pets have become one of the most critical elements to helping people deal with depression, anxiety. And when you live by yourself, it's really refreshing to have a pet that loves you and you love that pet and you can come home to it. Now, we have certain guidelines in terms of the type of pet and the size, because we have to respect everyone on the property and within the building. But it's very important for people to have their pets. So yes, we do allow pets.
And I think I heard you say more affordable housing is coming to the city of Pasadena.
Well, you know, Community Builders Group, our company, we have about 2,000 units of affordable units in the pipeline. And so we're working diligently with both the city of Los Angeles as well as Pasadena. And we look forward to being able to deliver a number of units within 2025, 2026, and accelerating that entitlement process. There's a new movement from Sacramento where the municipalities throughout California are responding to new measures that will help to advance entitlement process. And so, for example, AB 2011 is a state law that cities will be implementing that significantly reduces the time frame on entitlement so that one can submit an application and get permission from a municipality to proceed in a manner to build more affordable housing. Within 6 months, that city will make a decision on that project and then in turn answer the developer, yes, you have a go, or no, you need to tie a few things up here and then we can talk. But that movement and that mindset of moving the entitlement process on a faster track is really critical to the development of affordable housing.
I love this conversation. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'd also add that from the city's perspective, the city has modified the ordinance under which this particular development is built to be able to make the units a little bit larger, to make the development, a little easier to get done. So the city is looking to remove barriers to promote this kind of housing.
And let me comment on that. Many years ago, I made a pronouncement that I would never develop a project in Pasadena because it was so difficult to develop. I broke my promise, and I'm glad I did. The city of Pasadena has been a wonderful partner on this development, and kudos to John Kennedy, who we already talked about, but specifically down in the trenches, former planning director David Reyes and his staff. David is now the assistant city manager. They fast-tracked us through 3 rounds of design commission, and then we had timing needs due to the financing, and we went from our first submittal of blueprints, construction drawings, to 3 turns of redlining and corrections and a building permit in 3 months because we had to. And we had to work hard on the developer side. Our design team had to work very hard to turn those. But the credit goes to the city, David, and all of the departments on their side that fast-tracked that development. And we made our time deadline with 3 days to spare.
Wow, that is very impressive. I love that. So, looking at national trends, I'm always looking at what other cities are doing, and I know you all are doing the same. When you talk about affordable housing and developing affordable housing, so many cities have commercial buildings, office buildings that are sitting vacant because people are doing what we're doing right now. They're at home, they're using Zoom, they're working at home. So with these office buildings sitting vacant, and oftentimes you have people that are homeless right on the sidewalk outside the office building, what's being done to maybe utilize some of this vacant space? Maybe you have to rezone or, do whatever
Yeah.
needs to be done. But is that something that is being discussed in terms
Let
of?
me try to address that because we've been watching that very, very closely. Some cities, like the city of Los Angeles, allow multifamily residential zoning already by right in commercially zoned areas. Pasadena does not allow that, and I would strongly encourage them to change their ordinance to allow that so we can redevelop these office or other commercial buildings and turn it into much needed housing. The vacancy factor in office buildings nationwide in our large cities, in Los Angeles, in Pasadena, is down, and the decline is going to continue. About 60% of all of the leases are going to turn over for offices in the next 3 years. Some of those leases will renew, but many will not renew, or they'll renew for lesser space. So we're going to see more and more empty office space. Having said that, it's a real challenge to convert an office building into residential from a design and construction perspective, because what goes on inside an office building and how you lay out an office building is completely different than a residential building. So it's quite a challenge.
I would also say that the city planning department has in its work plan an effort to create what we in the development will call an adaptive reuse ordinance, which is to be able to adapt a building of one purpose for another purpose, to reuse the building, right? So adaptive reuse ordinance. So specifically to take properties that are non-residential and enable them to be able to be developed as residential. So again, the city is undertaking this effort to try to address this exact issue. But as Jim said, non-residential buildings are oftentimes designed very differently to residential buildings, and then it's hard to meet the residential requirements, like have enough windows and lights for windows for light and air in each unit. A lot of office buildings just have, they have very large floor plates and they have windows only on the perimeter, but if you're going to reuse the entire building as residential, you have to somehow figure out how to get light and air and ventilation down into the center of the building, not always so easily done, or not always that feasible. But anyway, this is a big area of opportunity. The city recognizes it. We do have some examples of buildings that have been converted, commercial buildings, office buildings that have been converted to residential, but the city is looking to make it more easily done through a adaptive reuse ordinance.
Bill, that's very exciting to hear. I wasn't aware of that, and that is truly awesome. And if we look at the City of Los Angeles ARO, Adaptive Reuse Ordinance, it has been very, very effective in converting old, functionally obsolete office buildings in downtown LA into really exciting and much needed residential. So I look forward to seeing that happen here in Pasadena as well.
That is awesome. Sounds like more opportunities to continue to house people. And that's the main goal of this. And that was the legacy of the late Councilman John Kennedy. And that's why we're here, to talk about housing people. And when you talk about the unhoused, we know that just recently there was a point in time homeless count. The city of Pasadena did see an increase by, I think, about 9% of people compared to last year, of people who are unhoused. A lot of these people are experiencing chronic homelessness. We know that some of it is financial, unemployment, COVID, you name it. But Bill, I'd like you to just tell us a little bit more about, with these numbers, with these facts that we know, what more is the city doing to try to combat homelessness?
Well, I can talk about this for another 2 hours, but I would just say that the point in time count, you're correct. We just reported it to City Council last week or this week, and the count is up 9%. But it's a point in time count, so numbers can fluctuate quite a bit on any given day for different reasons. But so you have to look at the trend. So over the last 13 years, our homeless count has come down 54%, but it hasn't been a straight line decline. During that time period, some years it was up 8%, some years it was up 18%, and some years it was down 20%. So it's not a straight line. So we have to look at, we like to use a 3-year rolling average to before we say, okay, this is really a trend, because it is good. Point in time counts are good for identifying trends, but you need to compare several years. So we're looking at that. But it's an important data source for us, but it's not our only data source. So I would say that there was nothing in the homeless count that surprised us. For instance, it said that seniors are becoming homeless it's a large segment of our homeless population, and they're one of the fastest growing segments of our homeless population. Why? Because seniors on fixed incomes can't keep up with the increasing housing costs, and the average Social Security payment is less than the median rent here in Pasadena for a unit. So even if somebody was getting the average Social Security payment and they used all of it they still couldn't afford their own unit here. So surely this issue is a big issue. But I would say we've noticed that. We noticed that several years ago, and we have a project under construction today that should be open in about 6 to 9 months that will provide 69 units of permanent supportive housing for homeless seniors. And so that's under construction today. In the report, for instance, it identified 20% of the unhoused population as being persons who are developmentally disabled. They have a limited cognitive function and cognitive capacity. Well, just the week before, the city council allocated about $2 million for housing, for permanent housing, to rehab 2 small apartment buildings for permanent housing for persons with developmental disabilities. Right. And we also saw that we have the newly homeless population is growing. Many of the people that we counted as homeless this year were homeless for the first time. And so to address issues like that, the city council approved an ordinance to allow safe parking safe parking programs to be carried out in Pasadena. Why? Because when people become homeless, if they have a car, oftentimes the first place they go to live is in their car. But living in your car on the street is not ideal for anybody. And so there are programs called safe parking programs where they are allowed to be in a parking lot and get connected to services, have access to restrooms. And the idea is to shorten their homelessness, state of homelessness, and get them, by being connected to caseworkers, get them connected to services and ultimately to housing, because cars are not a place where people should be living.
Absolutely. It's a multi-pronged approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a one and done.
Right.
It's going to take higher wages. It's going to take rent control. It's going to take affordable housing. It's just so many different, it's going to take nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
Helping people who are unhoused.
Right. So I would just mention, that the value of the data that we get through a point in time count helps us to target our resources, so that we can put the money where it will make the biggest impact, and put the money to fill the gaps that are really there. And the data helps us to really know the real situation, as opposed to people's just ideas. They see certain things and they think, oh, this is the case, or this is who is homeless. Well, the data shows us in more detail a more accurate picture of who is actually homeless here in Pasadena.
I think you were going to add to that, Jim.
I was just going to ask Bill a question. Bill, when is the Salvation Army's permanent supportive housing development going to open? I know that's soon, and I think it's 59 units or 52 units.
It's actually 66 units.
66.
But yeah, thanks for that question. This is another permanent supportive housing project that is under construction, almost finished. It'll open, I think, within the next 60 days or so. And again, it points to one of the findings in the homeless count is that we have a growing number of homeless veterans. Veterans are historically overrepresented within the homeless population. Well, there's a set aside for homeless vets in this project. I believe 16 units are set aside for homeless vets who are experiencing homelessness. So again, we try to, looking at the data, not just the point in time count, but all of our data sources, to try to target the resources where they're needed so that we can really make the biggest impact given our resources.
The need is definitely there. We talked about Pasadena Studios, 180 units, and Christian mentioned hundreds of applications for this facility. So the need is there. It looks like the intention is there. I know that we're all passionate about this, and it's just coming up with creative ways to get it done, and working together to get it done.
Yeah, I'd say, that affordable housing is typically produced primarily. There's three different ways of producing affordable housing. I mean, one way is to subsidize it, but there are limits on the subsidy amounts, right? There's never enough subsidy to provide all the housing that you need. So, but one way is to subsidize it, and the city of Pasadena and other cities and the state, the county, the state, the federal government provide subsidies for units. Again, we have over 565 units under construction today. Another way is to require it. And so Pasadena is one of the cities in LA County that have something called the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, which requires market rate developers to set aside 20% of their units as affordable housing. And then the third way is to incentivize it. And so the state has a density bonus that lets developers develop more units if they are willing to commit long-term certain percentage of the units for affordable housing. So we need all of these approaches. Pasadena is taking all of these approaches, as well as other things like adopting new ordinances, removing roadblocks, streamlining approval processes, all of these things, utilizing public land, for affordable housing, these kinds of things. So it really is, as you said, it's an all hands on deck kind of approach. We need to do all of these things, and micro units, and this 100% affordable micro unit is really one of the great tools and one of the resources for the city of Pasadena, the affordable housing resources for the whole city of Pasadena. So we are really looking forward to the completion of this project, and we really commend Jim and Christian and their corporations for doing this project. Most new development here in Pasadena is luxury housing, and Jim and Christian took a different approach here, and it's very, very admirable. I think they are really setting a pattern for other developers to look at, and if they can prove that it can be successful, I think we will see other developers also take this way. That's been pioneered by Jim and Christian.
Absolutely, and I find that when it comes to affordable housing, especially as a developer, you have to have a heart for it. You really have to care for people. Am I wrong?
Christian has a heart.
Well, like literally and figuratively.
You care about putting people in a home.
It is critical, and Joe Seeger, my business partner, and I, we met at Sun America Affordable Housing in the mid '90s, and so we've been doing this for a long time. And we used to work across the country doing these types of transactions where we were providing the equity as a corporate entity and buying the tax credits. And we've seen the changes in the marketplace. We are a for-profit entity, but we always say we have a nonprofit heart. And we started a foundation where we work with our stakeholders, not just on the individual property that we're developing, but we want to work with our neighboring stakeholders that have interest in the community. And that's why we really decided in 2014 to refocus on Southern California. Jim had said that he had a personal, just not developing in Pasadena for a variety of reasons. We are very proud to be associated with him and in doing his first Pasadena deal. This is awesome. It's been a wonderful opportunity to house people. We actually were introduced to that neighborhood. We bought the entire block on the other side of the street in 2017, and it was vacant at the time, and the former development entity that had owned it had allowed it to be unused, and there were a lot of dilapidated buildings and units within the context of those 5 buildings that we purchased. And in 2017 we bought it, 2018 we renovated it, and by 2019 it was back in the housing stock, and primarily for families and folks who were going through the Fuller seminary program, as well as Providence College, 2 Christian schools that were located down there. And we reinvigorated that housing that was there, that stock. And we hope to encourage other folks. I always say, if you have questions and you want to get into the housing market or housing development process, I'm open to answer questions. And really, if you look at the type of housing developers that are focused in affordability, you do have a dedication to housing people that goes beyond just earning a return on your investment. It requires so much work. And I think Jim unfortunately learned the hard way with the tax exempt bonds that we had to utilize to get this property financed, that it is a lot of work, but it is worthwhile. And at the end of the day, when we have that ribbon cutting ceremony, and then we get this property stabilized, you're going to see a lot of happy folks. And that is what our end goal is.
That's what it's all about. We only have a couple minutes left. I want to thank you all for being here. If someone wants to know more information about Pasadena Studios, once again, Pasadena Studios, located 280 North Oakland Avenue in the city of Pasadena, what do people need to do?
They can call our leasing office, which the number is 626-365-1307. Or in the alternative, they can visit our website, and that's Pasadena-studios.com. Pasadena-studios.com. And we're more than happy, as I said, to work with people, and Jim and the rest of our team. We've really committed to helping hear what people's stories are so that we could try to get them a unit in this building.
One more time, repeat that number, please.
The number is 626-365-1307.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing this information with our audience. Pasadena Studios, affordable micro unit development, the first of its kind in the city of Pasadena, affordable housing. And we are just so excited and so thankful for you all to be here and share this with our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, LaTonya.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to meet you.
Likewise.
Bye-bye.
And once again, a very special thank you to our guest today, Jim Osterling, representing Bridge Advisors. We also had Bill Huang with the City of Pasadena. He is the city's housing director, and Christian Hart, representing Community Builders Group. Pasadena Studios, once again, a 180 affordable micro unit development. You can check it out by going to their website at pasadenastudios.com. It's located at 280 North Oakland Avenue in the city of Pasadena, or you can give them a call at 626-365-1307. I'm LaTonya Norton. Thank you for joining us.